Coming to you from Huntsville, Alabama, high atop Montesano Mountain, it's Cry Aloud, the podcast proclaiming the importance of our Hebrew heritage for all believers. Now here's your friends, Chuck and Vicki Taylor.
Shalom, everyone, and welcome to our program. Hope you'll stay with us through the entirety because we're going to be talking about some interesting things today. A lot of things that people are talking about all over the internet, and it has to do with red cows.
Red heifers.
Female cows.
Female cows are heifers. But I was watching a reporter on TV interviewing some of the people protesting Netanyahu coming to talk and saying anti-Israel and anti-Jewish statements from the river to the sea. I'm aware of what they're talking about, and what they were saying was we're going to push Israel into the sea and annihilate them, basically.
That's correct. And, in the chanting, a lot of them, especially young people, really don't understand what they're saying in terms of annihilating Israel. Mm-hmm. It's a very catchy little thing that originated with the Palestinians.
Well, what I wanted to say is our program is to encourage people to embrace the Hebrew heritage of their faith. And if people understood and knew the heritage of their beliefs and the Jewish heritage and Hebrew heritage, then they would have a better understanding of what's going on in the world today.
That's right, because there's so much misinterpretation, so much misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. The chanting, for example, they were asked, well, what does that mean? What river, what sea?
What river?
College students, and they couldn't answer the question. They didn't know.
They didn't know what they were protesting.
No, they didn't have a clue. Mm-hmm. And that's why, again, as Vicki said, we encourage people to embrace our Hebrew heritage, because by embracing our Hebrew heritage, then that brings us back to the Old Testament, to the very beginning, where God spoke to his people. Mm-hmm. And we have those instructions from God.
And then you can understand what's going on in the world today by knowing your Hebrew heritage, or at least have some idea.
Have some idea of what's going on, because, again, not everybody is a student of world events and politics, and a lot of people they don't even care. Mm-hmm. But, we're living in a very unique time in history. We're living in a very volatile time in history. Mm-hmm. A lot of opinions are out there. A lot of theories are out there floating around. We just want to kind of today bring some of those into focus. For example, the red heifer. What is the significance of the red heifer? What does that all mean? Why, for example, you viewed a video, and millions of people have seen this video, Vicki, of a Hamas spokesman stating,
Well, I heard a reporter interviewing a Palestinian about why did you agitate or go into Israel and commit such atrocities? And he said, we had to because they have the red heifers. And I'm like, what? What did he just say? Because I was aware of what the scriptures say about the red heifers, but at the time I hadn't put two and two together until I heard that.
Well, in discussing and we find that in the book of Numbers, chapter 19. That's where we get the instructions about the red heifer. But I believe that this idea of the red heifer starting this war, which, the idea of it may well be true. I mean, there may be those in leadership of Hamas that figured, hey, we need to do something, because the first red cow to come over from Texas was back in 2022, about 2 years ago.
Well, maybe you should, some people may not be aware of anything about the
red cows.
The cows.
Red cows, yeah.
The red heifers. And so give them a little background so they'll understand it.
Basically, if you go to Numbers 19, verse 2, the priests were commanded from God through Moses to Aaron and his sons. They were being set up as priests. They were being consecrated as the first priest of Israel. And so the red heifer was to be a purification ceremony, a process. It wasn't a sacrifice to God. It wasn't to take place within the camp, okay, which was clean. It wasn't to take place on an altar. It was to take place outside the camp on basically a wooden wood pile. And they were to take a red heifer that was without spot or blemish, and they were to burn it up. They were also to add some hyssop, some scarlet thread, and cedar wood. That was to be added into the fire. And this red heifer was to be completely burned up, down to the ashes, everything. The blood was even burned up. So the blood was contained in the ashes. This is totally different from any other sacrifice the Israelites were commanded by God to perform. So then the ashes were to be taken gathered up by one person, taken to a particular place, a designated place, a clean place, and there they would remain. And then they would be used to purify, to cleanse, if you will, anyone who had touched or been near a dead corpse or of any kind, human or animal. And a little bit of the ash was to be mixed with water, and then that was to be sprinkled on the individual. And then if it had happened in a tent, for example, or any kind of a dwelling place, then the water, this mixture, was to be sprinkled on everything in the tent, on the tent itself or the household and the things in it that could have been contaminated. So it's a purification process.
So why would this cause such a disturbance that it could start a World War III?
Well, it seems like that they have taken this purification process of the red heifer, and this purification process, in other words, these Aaron and his sons who were being consecrated to be priests, they would not be able to enter into the temple, okay, or enter into, in this case, the tabernacle. The temple hadn't been built, but enter into the tabernacle and touch any of the consecrated things, the furniture, the utilities, utensils, all these things. They would not be able to do it until they had been cleansed. And this was the process of having them cleansed.
But what is their fear?
Okay, the fear is that this is the process that was used to cleanse the second temple, for example. The second temple that was built, okay, after the Jews returned from Babylon. In fact, it's said that this process has been used 9 times. And there is some sort of prophecy that if it's used the 10th time, when it's used on the 10th time, that will usher in the Messiah. Now, that's the Jewish thinking on it. So now you've got a red cow that's shipped from Texas to Israel, okay, 2 years ago.
Actually, there were 4 of them, wasn't it?
Well, there's 5 altogether, 5, but the first one was 2 years ago. So that, I'm sure, got the Hamas folks thinking, and maybe Palestinians in, leadership in general, that got them to thinking that, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because there are a group of people in Israel that are determined to rebuild the third temple. And they've been in the process, it's called the Temple Institute. They've been in the process of making the utensils, all the things that go into the temple, the garments, everything. They've been in the process for a number of years now. And the word is that they pretty much got it complete. It's ready to go. And they even have a group of priests descended from Aaron. So all these things seem to be in place. Well, what's necessary then is a sacrifice and then a rebuilding of the third temple.
Which would mean
destroying something, right? Destroying something.
They have their own property there.
So there's procedure. Going back to procedure, this killing of the red heifer, burning it up, and then the sprinkling is that you have to have a line of sight to the doorway to the temple. In other words, the holy place in the temple, because you're going to sprinkle some blood or some of this mixed ash, water and ash. You're going to sprinkle it towards that doorway. So there has been property bought on the Mount of Olives that gives you a line of sight to where the temple would be built. Of course, you don't have to have the temple in order to build the altar and make the sacrifices. Well, in this particular case, you don't have to have an altar at all. It's a wood pile.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
not
This is not
unto God. This
right. This is not something to God. Keep in mind that a bull, I mean, any sacrifice to God a bull would be a male, right? This is a female. So
the heifers,
this is not directly to God. This is to purify. This is to have a purification mixture available to purify anyone who has been defiled by touching a corpse or been around a corpse or touched anybody that has touched a corpse.
Right.
Okay, it's kind of contagious there.
Right. It's better.
Well, obviously they're afraid that if they try to rebuild the temple, then they're going to have to destroy the mosque and the possibly the Dome of the Rock, which they consider a very holy place.
Because it has to be rebuilt where Solomon's temple was, correct?
Right, that's the site. And so the idea is that they're going to build the third temple. They're going to destroy the mosque. They're going to destroy the Dome of the Rock. They're going to sacrifice these red heifers. And we don't know if that's going to be true. But here's the thing about it. It's like we watched an elderly rabbi talking about trying to pull God in to what they want to happen.
Right.
You know, and as he stated, we can't pull God into our way. His ways are not our ways. God's plan, God's plan is going to unfold on His timetable. You know, and so here we have a situation where men are trying to usher in the return of the Messiah. So they're trying to God out by, we're going to make this sacrifice. We're going to have this purification mixture available. We've already got the priest in lined up. We've already got the utensils lined up. I don't know why I struggle with that. We've got the utensils lined up. We've got a piece of property bought on the Mount of Olives where we can burn these heifers. We're ready to go. That's what it seems like.
And it caused the Palestinians to fear. We're trying to solve a war with man-made thoughts and plans when this is 2,000-year-old spiritual battle being fought here, and people don't understand this.
That's true. That's exactly right. It's a spiritual battle, especially us here in the West, in the United States. You know, we're politicians and leaders are saying, okay, well, here's the way we can stop this, and here's the way we can bring peace to the Middle East. And they don't really they have no idea of the history of how all these things have developed. In fact, we're going to post a link on our website that is a really excellent video that gives a real...
In a half hour.
It's a 30-minute video.
From beginning to end, pretty much. It's not in depth, but it'll give you a real understanding of what you're seeing on television today.
That's right. You know, it's very well done. You know, graphics are excellent. So we encourage you, if you're interested in something like this, want to know more, go to our website and i58media.com. We'll have a link there, and you can watch other videos that they have available. But what we're saying is we really need to have an understanding of the biblical background of how these things have developed in order to have any kind of understanding of where we stand. People right now prophesying, you and I have talked about this prophecy situation where people are just popping up almost on a daily basis, hearing from God. They got this word, they got that word. I mean, they're all over the map. And our opinion and advice, at least mine is, ignore these people, okay? Run from them. They've got a lot of followers. Why? Because people want to know something direct from God. Well, if you want to know something direct from God, get in the scriptures.
He wrote it all out.
He wrote it out, exactly.
It's there.
Get into it and read it from a Hebrew perspective, not from your denominational perspective. Vic and I were talking about this earlier. You know, Paul gets most of the pulpit time,
right?
You know, in Christian churches, especially in
80% or more of all pulpit time is Paul's letters.
So, you know, if you're going to go with Paul, then it would behoove us to study the words that Paul studied.
Right.
Paul studied the Torah. Paul studied the Tanakh, the Old Testament. That's all he had available to him. He didn't go to Peter's letters or John's letters or anything like that. He didn't go to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. He went to the Torah when he wrote his letter to Timothy, his protege. And there you've got a verse that he says, look, Timothy, study to show yourself approved. Or put it another way.
Study what?
That's right. Study to show yourself that you're capable of teaching God's word.
Right.
Well, what would he be talking about? He's talking about the Torah. He didn't whip out some of his letters and say, here, Timothy, here's a letter to the Galatians. This is what you need to study. No, it's the Tanakh, the Torah. That's what we're talking about. When we say embrace our Hebrew heritage, we're talking about embracing the word of God. That's where God spoke to his people. And so if you're going to follow Paul, if Paul is kind of your leader, then why not go to the words that Paul studied, preached, talked about? His whole life was involved in that. And that's where we come to this red heifer, rebuilding the third temple. If you don't understand these things from a biblical standpoint, you can get all kinds of confusion going on. You can start protesting things that you know not of. Why would anybody stand up and, in essence, join with Hamas, who is totally
would kill them in a second, the protesters.
Right.
Hamas hates them as well.
That's right. But
they're useful, though.
They want to, they're useful idiots is what it boils down to. Yeah. They want, they're making these big protests. Why in the world would you want to see one group of people drive another group of people into the Mediterranean Sea. Mm-hmm. To annihilate them off the face of the earth? I mean, if you call yourself a Christian of any denomination, you certainly couldn't support something like that. That's totally lunacy. If we're going to be called God's people, then we've got to stand up for God's people, and we've got to know what it is that we're standing up for. So be cognizant of these red cows. And when you hear stories about them, again, put it in perspective. Go to the Bible. Go to the Numbers, the book of Numbers, chapter 19. There's where you'll really get an understanding, okay? And it's not complicated. It's not a lot of mumbo jumbo, so to speak. It's just very straightforward. Here's the procedure. You may not understand the ritual side of how God is explaining it, okay, of what he wants the priest to do, but he has a reason for this. And it's up to us, his people, not to question why God is doing something that he's doing. It's up to us to figure out, okay, God said it, now how am I going to do it to the best of my ability?
Right.
It's when you read the word, we have a choice. We can read it and believe it, or we can read it and try to redefine it to fit our particular purpose, how we want to live. Like Vicki said, he gave us a way to live. It's blessings if we live that way, but most people don't want to live that way. Too hard, too complicated.
It's not hard at all.
And it's not necessary according to religious leaders' reinterpretation, okay, of God's word. Anyway.
If they've stuck with us this long, then we would like to ask you to subscribe to this channel. We don't come to teach you everything there is to know about it. We just want to encourage you to go into the scriptures and get a hunger to learn about your Hebrew heritage. And
comment.
Comment about it. That is so important because your comments helps us decide what to do with the next program, and we consider everything you say. So just know when you comment that we pay attention and we try to respond, and stay with us. That's what we're saying.
Give us a like, give us a comment, subscribe.
Everything. So if you don't mind, please subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, and it helps us reach further. Those algorithms make that decision. Right. So that's what you have to do to help us.
All right. Till next time, shalom.
Shalom.
Jehovah bless you and keep you.
Yehovah make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yehovah turn to you, lift up his countenance upon you, and give you shalom. Shalom, shalom.